We're recording.
Thank you. All right, welcome everybody to the Academic Committee meeting. We're going to call this meeting to order, and let's begin the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, next we need to approve the agenda, so if we could have a, thank you, Matt. Thank you, Kathy. All in favor? Aye. Aye, unanimous. Next, we need a motion to approve the October 2nd committee meeting minutes. Thank you, Mel. Thank you, Kathy. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Public comments? Mr. Public?
I have nothing to say. How's that for a change, huh?
Oh, hey, it's early in the meeting. All right.
What you asked for.
We appreciate what you all do, because it's always brought with a lot of thought and background and data diving. So, okay. What's first on our agenda today is a discussion of budget priorities. Now, this is new to me, obviously, and Kathy and Mel, our first time on the board, and Dr. Stratos. I don't know, your involvement with this, but the idea, as I understood it, and Dr. Blatz, I'm glad you're here, is that we're looking at our board's goals, okay? And the board's goals, obviously for the academic committee, one of the major board goals is the academic achievement. So we have to always refer back to the goals of the whole board and align our priorities with those. And then thinking about the scope that the academic committee has been tasked with, what of that scope rises to the top as far as where we would say, okay, this is where we feel the priorities for the budget should go. That's as I understand it. And Kathy and Mel, I'd like you guys to join in and see if that is your understanding of our task.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, and I think the important thing is that, we keep in mind our board goals. And as a board, we approved our overarching goals, and so we look to where the academics committee falls in there, and obviously it falls in under student achievement. Mel?
Well, I'm seeing it a bit differently in terms of, I see all the things you've said as factual in terms of all the things that comes on our purview. I see the request as kind of directing a list of priorities on our purview, and kind of, if you use a better word, directing the instructional leader, the superintendent, and others where we want to put that bang for the buck in terms of all of the possible things that they could possibly put on the academic achievement. I see it as the academic committee, we directing a focus so that they don't bring back $100 million worth of changes in terms of academics. They can focus on what's really a priority, and it will not chopping everything that's brought back. I think with giving a certain amount of directives, they can focus a little bit more on what our priorities are. I mean, the differences between Kate and early childhood, preschool, between elementary and, middle school arts, things like that. I think that's what our role would be, to set up a list of our priorities where we're no longer having 30 topics that could be addressed, but we got 2 or 3 that aligns with the, and all of them align with the board's goal of achievement,
Right.
but where we want that achievement to be directed now. And so as to, when it comes to public scrutiny, they're not out on a limb alone, and we're not separate from them at the end, but we've already committed from a public standpoint where we want the dollars to go. And it'd be an easier fix at the end than us not committing, and then at the end, we pulling the rug from underneath what they bring in. That's the way I see it. So, I'm thinking we need to just look at some priority things, and, not no dollar amount or anything like that, but what's the most important thing in terms of what we've discussed or what we will discuss that we think will drive academic achievement more so than anything else.
And-
I've gotten my opinion on what that is
Right.
already,
I'm-
but, can we come to some agreement on what it is so that they can say, we agree, we disagree, here's why we want to go this direction, and we can, the dialogue would have been started as opposed to getting it started at the end of the year.
And
That's what I see.
so do you see that, Mr. Campbell, as starting by looking at the various items that are underneath our scope,
Yes.
right? And I did put together the work plan. I saw these 2 things as going hand in hand. So you see a very crude graphic organizer in your folder, okay? And it was intentionally very crude and not complete by any means, because it was just a starting point so that we could all talk about, okay, here, look at all these different topics that we have been tasked, and there are some that might not even be on there that we need to add. And then to go from there and say, in what area do we think that, in order to get the academic achievement to where we need it to be, where would we put and support when a budget is brought to us, when Dr. Rodriguez brings, forward the recommendation for the budget, where would we be fully behind you if you were to say, okay, we're gonna, beef this whole area up because this is, the way to go. Dr. Guaz, could you, I find the process a little nebulous other than going through it that way. Do you have any other recommendation?
No, I think what you've said so far would be exactly the way we'd want to approach it. And, obviously, the academic student achievement is what we're here for. And I think your committee, the academics committee, has to decide, and I'd be curious, would like to hear what Mel's thoughts are, because you say you already have thoughts on it, of how that best could be achieved through the budget. Like, for example, and this is just an example, this may not be accurate or whatever, is, as we know, we have a lot of instructional software out there. And my understanding, having been on the board almost 3 years, is that it's not the same at each school or each cluster or whatever. And to me, that seems like just that in itself must be causing more dollars to be spent. Now, maybe I'm wrong, I might be wrong about that. So, I think we definitely need to see whether, that we're spending, or the software that we have is spent wisely. Should that be cut back? Should we add a math tutor at every school? I mean, that's just an example. Should we put more on the HR side and less on the software side? I don't know. I mean, I'm just sort of giving an example.
So in order to have some type of format and some process by which we look at all this, I was thinking that if we kind of started just on the left-hand column of the work plan, and we were to pose questions to Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Stratus, like, K-8 schools, Right, not looking at the work plan in its entirety, but just at the topic, the far left column. What budgetary impact would looking at the benefit or the cost, of a K-8 school? And you might say, we at this time don't see any budgetary impact for that as far as just trying to determine whether or not, so therefore that would fall, kind of off to the wayside. We wouldn't have to worry about that, but that is one of our main items under our scope, so I feel like we had to address it. But I don't want to go down a road,
I agree with
does
that.
this sound right?
I agree with that, but I want to go back to Tina's comment. I wouldn't get into that kind of specifics.
You would.
That in my mind, I call that getting into the weeds. That's their thing. They decide what needs to be cut, what doesn't need to be cut. We're trying to help them decide where they're focusing those cuts on at to get the optimum. I mean, the whole thing is theirs, but we don't want to talk about specific ways of getting where we need to go. In my mind, we need to think K-8, is that relevant enough to talk budgetary right now? And if it's not, then we go down this list that she has and decide how much and where we're thinking the focus should be, not how much money, not how much percent, just how much it's dear to our heart as a board. That's the way I see it. And Dr. Rodriguez and Mary, Dr. Stratus can talk about from their perspective what they think, because they're the one who drove this. It came from the finance, CFO, right?
No, this
No.
came from the finance committee.
Finance committee, but the finance committee got it from the liaison of the administration.
Okay, I didn't know which
Yeah.
way it was driven. I
Yeah.
mean, you're right, the whole idea is to try to prioritize.
Yeah, and
Right.
the process is, that's their budgeting process, when this is one of the steps in the 8-10 steps that they have before they bring us a budget,
Okay, Dr. Stratus?
so.
With regard to the software, just to speak at that, I think it's more of a question looking at usage versus effectiveness, right? I think that's more of the question, because the software is just a tool for instruction. So with that, we know that we have diverse learners, we're not all the same, right? If you look at the parking lot, there's all different cars out there, we all get someplace on it, but everyone has a tool, and that's one of the things from a teacher perspective. We can't say that everyone's just using this, so we may have to give other adaptations for teachers because they know their kids, but we need to be able to look at what is the usage versus, again, that effectiveness of that tool to say, hey, yes or no to it. Because if we say it's one size fits all, we're not all the same. So I just want to be careful with that conversation.
No, and I think, I agree with you, and I think usage is an easy thing to evaluate.
Right.
Effectiveness, not so easy.
Exactly, yes.
Now, K-8 schools, before you got here, when Ms. Allman was the curriculum instruction specialist, she gave a talk at this committee, and basically, the research out there does not show that, that's what she said, was that there was any really advantage in terms of academics, academic achievement for K-8 versus your traditional separating out. The only advantage, I think, as I recall, was basically some students struggle with the transition from elementary to middle school, and that's obviously would be eliminated if you're at the same school. But I think that was pretty much it, as I recall.
Well, and I think that kind of conversation we would have when we talk about the work plan versus a budgetary priority. So that's why I was asking, let's just focus on the first column and say, do you see the K-8 schools as being an area that that you would present to the board as having a high impact on your budget? And my guess would be no at this time. I mean, it strictly would be maybe.
That's a community as need.
Exactly.
That K-8 was designed for smaller communities to be serviced versus as an academic intervention.
Right, and then when we get into like, what does the academic committee have to look at, that's when we would get into, okay, what are some of the, I mean, we have to address it. We were mandated by the board to look at, should every cluster have a K-8? But at this particular point in our conversation, does that have a budgetary impact? I would submit no. We're having a conversation about it, or we'll have a report about it, or
Yeah.
we'll have a community
Study,
forum about
yeah.
it. So that's how I was thinking that we need to go through our mandated scope
Let's go
to
do
do,
it.
all right? All right, so we would just put that to the bottom of the list as far as budgetary priority.
Yes, yes.
The calendar, what budgetary impact would you come to us and say, oh, the calendars, we're gonna have to request X, it doesn't matter, but that's gonna be high on it because it's gonna demand this much more money. Are you suggesting adding 3 weeks to the school year? We've done it. We've had extended learning during the summer. And so, but for the bottom quartile.
And
my
if
question.
I can say something about that, now, we've been in discussion with John, who wrote the operations, about changing start times and, and how that would impact, and that would cost dollars. If we agree to do it, because that's money in the budget that would go, if we look at it in terms of a study and say, that's where we want to go to improve achievement, the youngsters go first to school and they're going later than normal because now early is too early for them. That's money that we're gonna cost if we had a report on how much buses would be added, et cetera, which would change some of the dynamics of budget. But I'm not saying that's high on my list,
Right.
but I'm just saying if we did, that's the kind of coordination that has to be done, and that's where we gotta say, yeah, we wanna do this.
And how does that,
Run the floor by floor.
align with our goal for a School of Academic Achievement? Every budget request, or, every line item that's going to be brought, well, maybe not line item, but pretty close to it, there should be a clear and evident alignment to one of the board goals, right? Student achievement, teacher quality, highly qualified teachers and administrators. Everything should work its way back to one of these goals. And I think that's really what we are, trying to figure out here is what can we say? Look at that is such a straight line, that is a linear, boom. We are gonna support that with the budget.
No, you could find evidence based, probably justify either one, but that's why we got into the youngsters started early in the first place because there was supposed to be evidence that the high school kids would do better if they started later.
And have we seen that
And
evidence?
we have, well, there you go. I'm just saying.
Graduation
That-
rates increasing.
it-
Right, the graduation rate has increased, and there are principals who believe that it has made a difference with it. And I came from a scenario of that, having a late start for high schoolers. The attendance actually improved with some of the schools. The convict side of that is the athletic side of the house, right? But we're here for academics.
Academics, yes.
When we first did that at that school, I was there at that time as an assistant principal, and we saw a difference in attendance initially. We saw a difference in attendance and even behavior
Yeah.
for a while initially.
Okay, yeah, that's, I'm kind of like off topic, but I'm just.
Yes.
Yeah.
But with calendar.
Which I am, yeah.
With calendar, can we take into consideration the professional development of teachers when we're looking at a calendar, the opportunity of lending for more workshop and building their capacity in targeted areas? So we're looking at calendar. I know we have X amount of days that are required by state, but building their capacity, I think, is also.
And that certainly would be a budgetary
Yes.
consideration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's no way we're going to increase student achievement
we're
without
not doing-
building our capacity.
Right.
Yeah, there you have a relationship.
Right?
And
Okay. John?
I can tell you, if I may, what I did with as a board member,
Yes, please.
is the administration comes to us with a request for an investment. I'd be looking to the academics committee to have a priority that every instructional tool, be it software, program, has been vetted for its efficacy, so that you can say, Dr. Stratus says it's a good idea for instruction, and we recommend investing the money. That's what has not happened. That's why we have this pile of software licenses that nobody's looked at, for X amount of years. That's what I'd be looking for
Right.
as a board member when I'm asked to vote on that part of the budget. I'm going to assume that you folks agree on the alignment of the item with the goals. Okay, I'm looking for the recommendation on the investment. Is this the wisest way to put our money into play to achieve what you want?
I have
So
to ask,
that would be my priority, that everything that comes to us in the budget has been vetted for efficacy, I guess.
or at least that we can present to you, here's a resource that shows the impact on this in another site or what's behind it,
Mhm.
right? I just want a point of clarification
Yeah.
with that, right? The why of using this,
Right.
is that something that would be acceptable? Okay,
Yeah, because,
because that's
sometimes the
important.
evidence not gonna be there. We talked about kind of like changing the method of the way things were operating, so you may not have any facts locally on how this thing works. It might be a different idea in which nothing has been vetted, you know? This might be something that's cutting edge, out of the box. Now, the idea is, are we gonna back something out of the box because it's going in that direction? Or are we gonna remain fine-tuned to what we're using now? And that's where we are in terms of doing something, in my mind, different to close the achievement gap. All right? And to get achievement in a different place. Or else we'll be, right down the same checklist we had last year, and we don't know how how those line items even will form. This year, we expect to see some things, line items that resonate to us, and then, like you say, a convincing argument on why it's there and why we should go with it. That's what I'm thinking.
So one of the things with software or with technology is, with my division, we are having a conversation, what is the rollout plan? Right, so it's not just an item, but what is the plan for utilization and the plan for implementation of building our skill set? So that's a conversation we're having, and it's a protocol that I'm asking for practice as well. Right? Because I think it's important, if you buy something, what's the plan for implementation, and what will the rollout look like?
And training, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. I mean, I think achievement gap is, these other things play into that. So, again, if someone has a better idea of how to do this, because this is a new way of doing this, please, speak up. Okay, achievement gap, anybody want to say anything about that? I mean, we know that that's exactly student achievement, what we're all trying for, so I think everything else fits under that, okay? The choice program, you want to say something? Sure.
Actually, yes, because if you're looking at achievement gap and we're looking at interventions, do we look at how we're budgeting in regards to areas of more needs? And then putting fidelity of practice to make sure that that budgeting has a proper plan to ensure that are we hitting these marks. So I think achievement gap has more of a budgetary than we might really realize, because what is the why we're not meeting the mark? Is it academic, is it skill set, is it social emotional? That to me is what is one of the driving force for us as a system.
Right, and what I was thinking is that
Okay.
you see discipline under there, you see
Yeah, yeah.
special education.
But it all.
Early
yeah,
childhood,
it's
that's what
like-
I was thinking, those
okay.
are the things those are
all-
the
Those are
tripod,
the legs of it, I got you.
what's,
Kristen,
what
yeah.
is, so certainly achievement gap is the overarching one,
Yes.
but
Okay.
But it's so broad, what is it, what's causing that achievement gap?
It's-
Well, is it our special education? I mean, meaning lack of resources? Yeah, but see, that's what I'm saying, it's
Yeah,
it's
I got
probably
you.
not inclusive.
Yep.
I've got literacy down there at the
Yep.
bottom, but, so that's why I was thinking that it might be better to go on further down the
Okay.
list, because these fold into, these are the supporters,
Yes,
or
ma'am.
lack thereof, of
Okay.
achievement gap. The choice program. You know, is it really choice? And is that something that we are going to suggest that we make it real choice by doing transportation? I mean, that would have huge budgetary implications. And that would be something that we'd need to hear. Whether, Mr. Smith?
Now, I was gonna say, with us, when we were talking, I was kind of, I was came in kind of, but I was gonna say, just to go back to, what Mr. Campbell, and what we were talking about last night about, the fact of actually taking them out, taking a certain portion of the budget to actually emphasize early childhood education.
We're gonna get to that.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it's down here
Down
further
here.
down.
Oh,
No,
okay.
that's exactly it.
Yeah, yes, ma'am, that, and, you're right, the choice program, I think that we said, once we got on the board, that we wanted to possibly look at that and see if it's really choice and see what the choice program is actually doing. So when it comes down to that as well, I think we need to see whether we want to keep choice, because I'm not sure that right now, even when the guy came back and he did basically he did we had a guy come back when we talking about, before we talking about the referendum.
McKibben's report.
Right, there you go, right. What'd you call it, Mr. Campbell?
Gibbons report.
Right, I know, but I was,
Yeah, he was a demographic,
right,
demographic.
right, and when he did the studies of the district, he said if everyone would go back to their schools, then we wouldn't have overcrowded schools. And I think that people are using the choice programs to go to school where they want to go. And that's something that some people may say we don't need to dig into, but no, because it's our job to make sure that we're financially good, so we're not catering to people based upon their personal preference.
Right,
You know,
right.
that's something that you have to pay for. We owe every kid in this district for education, but we don't owe them pay for their preference.
Right.
And so that's
And
something
so that is absolutely going to be a major topic that the academic committee has to address.
right.
So what we're looking at right now, though, is that gonna have, are you guys thinking that might be a huge budget, you know, adding choice, the bus, is that gonna be a huge budgetary thing? And I know you can't answer that yet. And we would have to have, you know, vetting in the academic committee too, and recommend to the board if choice or no choice. I mean, so see how this is all in jello. It's all very much in jello.
Yeah.
But we need to kind of get an idea what your thoughts are.
What was the financial impact with the change of the choice model that was utilized now? Really none.
The only financial impact with the choice as it is now is certain choice, and I don't know if this is still ongoing or if the teachers have all been trained, but the IB program requires specific
Yes.
staff development.
Yeah.
So that's the only,
I have 28
that's,
teachers. It
that's the
requires
only
some
financial
training.
impact at this time.
Well, I disagree with that a little bit, just because of the fact that, once again, our schools being overcrowded, we have overcrowded schools, and so now it's costing us to build more schools because of the choice program, because certain kids prefer to go to certain schools because of the choice program. So the choice program is,
Okay, and we're gonna get into that choice
Yeah,
conversation.
but I think Doc can give you better statistics that most of the choice schools are filled with the students who are targeted to go there.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of kids going elsewhere. The choice schools don't have seats for other kids to come in.
Okay, and John's been waiting to say something. Yeah.
Just a suggestion. Fabi, but if your goal is to make a list of priorities for the budget to talk about the next work session, whatever we call it, you can have something as simple as a full economic program in the budget for choice expansion. That's all you need. You don't have to sit here and talk about the pluses and minuses of this approach to choice and that approach to choice, or whether it's a good idea. It's just a priority to deal with the issue
John, and that's
That's
what
what
I've
we're
been
trying to
saying,
do, John.
but I didn't want to cut everybody off. There's,
That's
because
what
all
we're
this.
You drive yourself crazy.
Well, that's all right. I mean, it's, you know what, we're gonna talk about this stuff during a particular academic, that's why we're gonna have a work plan that tells us when we're talking about all this. And so I didn't wanna cut Mr. Smith off, I didn't wanna cut anybody off, but yeah, so thank you for bringing us back around.
We had a meeting last year at Battery Creek High School, and we were talking about reassignment of students. And we weren't sure how many kids were gonna go to what school. And somebody started talking about, well, how many bus drivers are we gonna need for this school? When we didn't even know how many kids were
Right.
gonna go.
Right, I understand your point, yeah, so that's why I'm trying to facilitate and move it along, but there's some really great ideas that I hope when we do put on the work plan, the date we're gonna talk about choice program and get into all these nuances.
You'll have information.
We'll have all the information we need and everybody come and we talk about it. That's the whole purpose of this two-pronged meeting we're having today. Budgetary priorities and then a work plan so that we'll talk about the plan for the topics, okay? All right, so that could have huge budget implications depending on, but as far as right now, it's ongoing, it's in the budget, we're not establishing a new one, so, it could have, so, all right. What about the CTE?
Your essential question with regard to the alignment, I did have a meeting earlier today with TCL, and we are aligned on our three technical education courses that were completed, so.
Right, but do you see that you're gonna bring to the budget that there's gonna be a vast expansion of Kate? Can you see where that's other than what?
Other than the referendum?
If the referendum passes, right.
Yeah, other than the referendum.
Probably not the priority for
Not
this budgetary
priority
year,
for
right?
this year.
Okay, all right. Instructional technology, we kind of brushed on that, and I'm with Mel. I think that is a little bit in the weeds for us for budgetary priorities. I think that falls underneath your instructional approach. And how you and Dr. Rodriguez are going to increase your teacher capacity and your leadership capacity. And it's that whole plan.
Google certified teachers. Yes, and all true. Google certified teachers, so that they understand the free software that we already receive. And there's 3 levels of it, really, you get Google trainings within our teachers.
Yeah. I'd be interested to hear more about that.
Me too.
Okay. Okay, so I feel like we're getting to the meat, like student discipline. Student discipline.
I think that falls under the achievement gap and also early childhood.
To me, discipline is huge, and I would support, after we have some more conversation about it, but I know teachers leave because of discipline problems. And I know that last night when Karen McKenzie, was that just last night?
Yeah.
Karen McKenzie spoke about this discipline plan that was fabulous. But do we have the personnel that we need for discipline? That's the kind of thing that I think that, in my opinion as a board member, if you brought additional personnel requests to assist with discipline, whether it looks like hall monitors, or whether it looks like
Social workers.
social work,
Dean of
EMS. Huh?
Or dean of students.
Yeah, whatever it might look like. Yes, ma'am.
The interventions before we get there.
Right.
That's
I
the social,
think-
yeah.
Yes, the
I
holistic.
think the interventions before we even get there, and then training on discipline with dignity,
Right,
right?
yes, ma'am.
There's restorative justice, there's whole other, but interventions first. And this is gonna have an implication because we used to have a department that would, student services. And I think if you really talk about the whole child in a social emotional perspective, you have to redefine it. This is a department. With the interventions, with the discipline, everything all back together.
Holistic approach.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, because right now it's marbles. Now
And
it's
that does
little
tie in with
baby.
academics.
Excuse
It does
me?
tie in with
Yes.
student academics.
Yeah,
Can
yeah,
teachers
it-
teach?
Yes, but it does, but there's a lot. Student attendance, social workers, interventions, social emotional learning, executive function, there's just,
students with trauma, and poverty is trauma.
Adversity, impact on children. So there's just so much more that we're not able to address because we're like a two-headed serpent right now, right? We're instruction and student services, and I have no issue. But I just want us to be conscious that this is a big one.
It is.
Well,
And what kind of,
go ahead.
I guess, what, so we agree that it's a big one, and we agree it's gonna need some money, that this would be part of our budget. So my question is, are we, going to specify, how do we know what we need, what specific things we need to take care of this? Where specifically we would need to put the money? I guess that's my question. As a school principal, I could tell you what specifically I needed to address some discipline issues. As a whole district, I don't know what specifically is needed. So would we be able to do that?
Well, and this would play right into, like, if we say student discipline is one of our high priority, and we will support you because, but it has to be done after we have vetted it through a meeting where that is the topic. So if we're saying this is a high priority one, then when we go through the calendar to put the date there, that would rise to the top, so it'd be ready by budget time, right?
Yes.
But,
Yes.
I'm looking at it from a little bit more holistic standpoint, I guess you can say that. I'm with Earl in terms of how do we address it overall, systemically? Not, we've got a system of undisciplined students. How do we fix it with an approach that we're gonna start now and it might not happen until 5 or 6 years from now? So
Agreed.
how do we slant that budget to direct the issues now? That's why I'm thinking early childhood and early childhood interventions, and the discipline will eventually go away over time. But this year, when you come with the budget, I would expect that what you ask for in terms of an addition would be that kind of direction, as opposed to cake program or something else. I think we begin to fix what's going on.
I think
in the future. That's what I'm thinking.
I agree with you, Mel. I think one of the other things important is when we're dealing with early childhood education, right? Definitely the right way to go. It's important, but that's something that investment pays dividends 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
Yes.
9 years down the road, right?
Yes,
So it's the
I
right
understand.
work and it's important, and I bring that to everybody. So you know what I'm going to say,
Yeah?
right? Because
It's not gonna be reflected.
no,
maybe in
the
our-
reason I bring it up is because as we plan to also see results on a year-to-year
Yes,
basis,
yeah.
right? But to keep in
Understand
mind that
that.
a heavy investment here is essential to overall fix this, right? Okay? But at the same time, we have to have investments along the way so that we can see some dividends for those that are not in early childhood grades at the moment, right? We still have them within our system, and we still have to do something for them, And so that's a
Yeah, it's a multi.
Yeah, it's-
I mean,
Yeah.
we're not gonna
Yeah.
quit teaching geometry.
No.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, I got you. I'm with you.
I don't
In
know,
terms of I'm thinking where we slant the budget a little bit, where we go a little bit askew with where we are.
Yeah.
And if we, if we're gonna go a little bit askew, I would expect it to be down at the bottom.
Right.
That's all I'm saying.
John?
Yeah.
As I understand it, maybe I'm wrong, we're gonna have this budget workshop where the board decides what its priorities for the budget are. Then the word is gonna go forth, and the senior staff is gonna charge off, say, here's what the board wants to see in the budget. That's where they can get into the weeds and design their programs around
Right.
and align with
Agreed.
these.
Agree.
Okay, well, we setting some of the board's priority
And
right
that's,
now.
yeah, and
Right.
that's
So they
where the
don't-
real discussions.
Yeah.
Right, right. And so we're working
Yeah,
we're working our way.
We'd be there forever if we discussed it all
Yeah.
at that
Yeah.
board workshop.
And you know what, maybe this is a good time, David did ask me to talk about this at the academic committee meeting. You know, the ad hoc results committee is working on metrics right now for the evaluation of Dr. Rodriguez. And the metrics are aligned with everything we saw last night, all that data. So SC ready test scores, college ready, career ready, the achievement gap of our minority, new majority students, the African Americans, the Hispanics, or the English language learners, I think is really what category is. So what we've put together is, you know, a very defined, a very definitive metric in terms of where the baseline, this is the baseline year for Dr. Rodriguez, where the data is now, and you know, how he will be marked. Now, for the first year, for this period, we're asking that there be no slippage in any of those percentages, that nothing, that we're asking for stabilization. Everything stays stable so that the team can, you know, we don't want to go backwards. Everything needs to stay stable, and then after the preceding years, the expectations for increases will show up on the metric. So,
Thank you, Kathy.
Now, is that gonna be ready to present to the board along with the budget priorities? Are they gonna be discussed in alignment? Because the board's gonna have to take a look at what the ad hoc results committee is proposing and approve that.
yeah, I don't know when we're,
When you have
we
it
have,
ready.
we have a committee meeting tomorrow to see the final, I think Daniel has come up with the final metric for us, because remember that data was embargoed. So we couldn't fill in the numbers
Yeah.
until just recently when
Right.
the data came out. So we're gonna see that for the first time tomorrow, what it looks like with the data. And, I'm sorry.
Then it comes to the board.
then it will come to the board.
And don't forget that the finance committee will be coming in with some priorities that are certainly linked to student achievement, but not in a very direct way. You know, well, you have to dig a little bit more to see the connection rather than a percentage of test scores.
There,
But
in the ad hoc, in the document, there are finance expectations. The components, the 5 components of what are expected, I'm not gonna be able to rattle off, and I don't have, but.
okay, yeah, I didn't want
It's
to
all in
sidetrack
there.
into a
Thank you,
conversation
thank
with
you.
evaluation.
Yeah.
There's a question I have for you, Kathy, in terms of that. Next year, we're gonna do another results, committee and template and new parameters
Well,
after this year.
I think that will be for the board to decide. I think what our initial thought was.
This next
that
year's
Next year, it just
evaluation.
starts with the new numbers, and we reuse the same evaluation. Now, if we're not happy with the evaluation, if it doesn't give us the information or the feedback to Dr. Rodriguez that we think it's designed to do, then I think we look at it again.
No, yeah, I'm thinking the other way. I'm thinking after next year, we'll be looking at something differently, yes, and maybe the percentage changes depending on the age
Oh,
level.
that will definitely
And
help.
that's
Yes.
why this year, be fair, if they understood that's gonna be the approach. So the next year, when we really hit the road, he's already
Yes.
got a head start and some fundamentals put in.
That is,
Terrain of issues changes every year as we make progress. So there's nothing to say that we'll be measuring them in the same metrics for 4 years. consecutive.
Right, that's what I.
Right, the metrics themselves will change, the categories probably will not.
Right.
That's
Okay,
what my comment.
So Kathy, your point about tying that into what our work today is to,
I just wanted you to know that I don't think it has any, at this point, has any budgetary implications. I think that,
I think what she was getting at is that if the results committee is driving one way, but then overall priorities are driving another way,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
These two have to
Right.
match.
Right.
That's,
Right.
I think that's
That's
your point,
what it
right?
was.
That was
Board's
her
priorities
point. That was her
So-
point.
The
That's why
expectations will
my
be,
point.
will be weighted towards what the board decides what priorities are. Board can't decide its priorities based on what an expectations list is.
Yeah, I understand, but whatever that is, then
Right.
that has
Gotta
to
be fair,
adjust, right?
right?
Something's got to adjust to align, right? If it's
Right.
not the same,
Something has
but if
to
it's the
be
same,
something.
great, right?
right. And I think that they all are leading to goal number one. They're all aligning to that. So therefore, we're on the same page with this. So you see student discipline, that's going to, so we would anticipate that you all would come up with a plan
Can't have
that
one
might.
without the other.
Right,
Right.
exactly. What about special education? Okay, I'm gonna say that is something of great concern, as, in my mind, and I will push for that. I will push for additional personnel. I will push for looking at making sure that if the model is inclusion, then you have to have enough people so that these teachers can plan together. Inclusion will not work without planning, but the way that it's set up now, there's no way.
And the training for proper inclusion.
There's been training, there's thousands of dollars has been spent on Stetson training.
Stetson training.
And it makes no difference if you go into, and I'm preaching to the choir, I know that. But it makes no difference if you have all the training for inclusion in the world and you have no time to plan because your schedules, you're always teaching when they're, I'm
You're back to a
planning.
personnel scenario.
Exactly. And I believe that when the academic committee looked at the co-identification of students identified with special needs and our achievement gap, we were looking at up to 70% of the children that are identified in the achievement gap have special needs. That's all the data I need right there for me to say that they're, plus 20 years of working in this district in special education, okay, is we don't have the personnel to get the job done. Look at our vacancies, all right? So if I were to prioritize that, I mean, that's right up at the top and would support, and we know you make some changes and that academic achievement, you're gonna see growth.
I support everything you said. I did that. And including, I just want to add one thing. And speaking of special ed, also, we have to start paying our assistants as though we value them. Because right now, it does not appear that. And we have a lot of special ed teachers. I talked about over the summer, I talked to 2 special ed assistants who quit because they wouldn't feel the value. And, they love the kids and they love their job. So we have to let their check reflect that we care as well, so that we can keep these people on, because the longer they're here and the longer they understand these kids, and these kids buy into them, and these kids are buying into the division, and that also takes down the behavior issues that we have. Because once I get to learn you and I know you, then I can tell you, stop it and that's it. So
It's
that's
all about the relationship.
Yeah, it is.
And we
it
tried,
is.
we did that with this year's budget. We put money toward that, toward the classified personnel. And so, it might mean that you all are going to recommend additional budgetary increase for classified personnel. Remember, we did that this year.
Yeah, we did.
So
We did.
we're but are we where we need to be? I mean, that's all.
Well, I'm still saying the same thing. It's all philosophy. And you put money into additional support in 11th, 10th, and grade, put another person in there. The bang for your buck is better down there in the 2nd grade now, and you're not gonna see your numbers change. So I wouldn't be worried about that results more so than worried about a plan to get better results. And that's what we should be about. Of course, Frank and Mary, they're independent you know, still employed and still professional, so, yeah, they're worried about what their evaluation's gonna say. So we don't wanna send a bad message to them in terms of what their evaluations say, but you have to be honest about what we're looking for in the long term. Because if 5 years from now, and they're still here, and those numbers hadn't moved, you're gonna have people saying, hey, what have they been doing for 5 years?
Right.
So,
Sticking a person in 11th grade where a child is already basically an adult and almost unchangeable, when you can make some changes early where that child would never get to the 11th grade like that, ought to be something we're really concerned about and thinking about.
So let me guess, your priority is early childhood?
Early. And I think the discipline will go away too in the long run. And the achievement, you won't have, guess what else might happen? You won't have as many children in special ed programs.
That's right.
I know about 6 kids
The
right now.
special ed program, you know, half of the time is because of discipline.
but that and not meeting the academic needs of me as a learner, right? And that's a conversation that has to be had. And what is the instructional model being utilized, not beyond inclusion, but what are the tools that are integrated for the use with our kids who are SPED children? Because it is about the early intervention and helping that child read, so that as 11th grader, they're able to read.
Right.
So
And
it goes,
you're right, and meeting the child's need, meeting them where they
So,
need.
it
But
has
when you have,
budgetary impact.
it does, when you have
It
15 children in a resource class on 3 grade levels and you have no assistant, and you're supposed to do small group instruction and behavior,
Yeah.
I mean, it is a
Challenge.
challenge.
Right.
And it,
October 10th. that's
Need a
what
referendum
it's
for academics. We did.
We'll say.
so,
Cool.
Kathy,
Yes.
what would you say your priority?
My priority is the early special education. I think that if we can, early childhood, I agree with Mel, we can prevent kids from going into special education by making those gaps. And we know that, kids that start school from poverty kids come with something like 10,000 fewer words in their vocabulary.
Yes.
That's huge.
Yes.
When you talk about educating kids and they don't have number sense, they don't have letter sense, they don't have any of those things that many of our more privileged children and our children probably collectively sitting around this table came to school with.
They start off
They
with
start
an
out,
achievement gap.
they start out with an achievement gap.
Yeah, but
But
a lot of the other stuff is manifested.
Yeah.
Right,
You know,
Yeah, that's
no, I don't wanna read now, I won't read,
yeah,
because I'm not comfortable with reading.
right,
So there's a reading gap, and then some diagnosis that, hey, this kid's just really slow.
Yes.
Yep.
And
You know,
then we
I-
need that
Need
Yeah.
some help, yeah.
yeah, the behavior
Goes up.
comes in because
So I don't know
right.
how we don't, I'm just saying, in terms of, if we serious about what we say are our goals, and achievement gap is one of the big ones.
Mhm.
If we gotta put our money where our mouth is, and let's face it, we don't have any money. We're fighting every year to get a budget that's really inadequate. So something got to go.
Some things have
And
to-
something have to
Right.
be gained if we gonna fix it, if we're genuine about fixing it.
Right.
That's my thought coming into this meeting.
If we could take also consideration of adding parent education, because we're taking all the ownership of reform, not realizing that the better I can help parents and educate parents, that's another tool that we could utilize. I just wanted, if consideration could go in that. Well, I would look at adult ed, to be honest with you, right? I could look at adult ed from another perspective, it's another source, right? So I'm just, it's something that we obtain already, are we tapping it to the fullest capacity and use? So I'm just,
Our Title I schools, they
they're
all,
obligated.
they're
They
obligated
are
to have
obligated.
parent
Yes,
education.
yes.
Now, I would put forth that they could double it what they have. I mean, some, and I don't know
But
what our
an
district.
effective use, that,
Yes.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's a key, so maybe we could develop something that are best I hate to use the word best practices, but practices that we know have been successful, right? Just don't say you're gonna do, but, and I think we need to get greater education out in the community to our mothers, right? Because what is, you can determine who I am by my mom's literacy.
That's right.
And we forget about that component, and it's an avenue we could tap onto, even with literacy coalitions, reaching out to them.
Yeah, and the literacy center, you know, in Hilton Head, works specifically with adults. And their job, the literacy center in Hilton Head, their mission is to get adults to learn to read. And, yeah, it's called the literacy
And
center.
get
They
books
meet
in the kids'
volunteers.
houses. It's okay to steal.
I was gonna, I just ask, Doc,
Yes, sir.
well, I can, both of y'all, maybe, down here, we had a parent university.
Mhm.
What do y'all think about maybe let's get some, maybe try to get some funding for that and get that up and running to help teach parents. Maybe see if we can get some federal funding money for that.
I've talked a lot about Parent University when I'm out listening to the community and that sort of thing, and there's value in that. There's good value in that.
So-
Support for our parents to be able to help their students at home.
Oh, they're all in here. Hey, we were locked out.
Locked out?
No, it's not officially time yet. We came in through the
No, you
The
know
meeting
what?
came through the cheating door.
Did you see the agenda? We started at 3.
Oh, no, I thought it was 4.
Thank you.
Sorry. It's usually a 4, so that was my bad.
I feel like
Yeah, I
it's
mean, we're not just chatting.
One thing says you missed the public comments.
my apologies.
Well, yeah, I was just wondering that because you brought up a great point about the parents. And I was just wondering maybe we could, I think we could get more of that and make the parents feel more comfortable to start coming in and learning. I think that would definitely, not only that, would that change some of our schools, that would change some of our culture and our communities, and it helps us in so many ways that the results are unseen.
So
Yes.
what I'm hearing you say is that adult ed might be a budgetary, something that you know, so when that's brought and discussed in the academic committee, we would decide whether to support it, right? And so,
Yeah, but also,
Right?
I'm trying to also, partly, yes ma'am, but also trying to see if we can get some free grant money to,
sure.
fuel some of these programs as well.
Right. And I'm just trying to move the meeting along.
Okay,
so that
okay,
because,
I'm
because I
with you.
think that's a great
Yes,
idea,
ma'am.
but I think that will come in when we're having the conversation. Well, you know what I mean? When we're saying, okay, is this really, is this how we're going to change early childhood is by educating parents? Is this how we're going to increase or decrease the achievement gap, increase achievement? You
Okay.
know?
Okay.
So is there anything on this list that, I realized I didn't add ESOL, and again, this was a very
Yeah.
crude list, and I was hoping for people would add things, and I think ESOL is another,
Yes.
Yeah,
And
definitely needs to
so-
be on there.
Social, emotional, arts education.
So, sitting here, I'm thinking, you know, another budgetary, something impact on the budget is, you know, we have an RFP out for a grant writer. It may be money well spent based on what Parent University, some of the, you know, if the grant, I think, would need the, well, I would hope, if we were able to come up with someone that they also had some direction
Or from the strategic plan, let's say,
yeah,
our
these
strategic
are
plan.
things that you need to go after, see what you can find. But again, we don't know where that RFP is, but it does kind of sound like that might be helpful.
all right, so Kathy and Mel, when we come to the budgetary workshop, and we have to give our priorities for the budget. See, the problem I'm struggling with this is I don't see how we can do that until we have some input and have talk and get into the real understanding of what is needed in those areas.
So it would make it easier, though, we could narrow down, so at least for our upcoming meeting,
Uh-huh.
I could develop and bring information to the table to show where we're at, where we could be. And then you could then establish your priorities from that, because it's hard.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think once the board is able to provide what the priority is, then a lot of these things on this list, right, we would be able to sort of manage and bring a recommendation for greater investment on any one of these things, because we believe it would give us the greatest return on investment on accomplishing the priority.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
It does.
That's all
It
we're
does.
looking for.
Right.
So I think we need to sort of zero in on the priority, and then we can. I think that's.
I agree with you. I agree.
So,
To recap, go ahead, Mary.
well, I'm just gonna be informal about an asset. So from what I'm hearing, some of the priorities are obviously student academic achievement, right? Let's identify the gap, let's focus on to where the gaps, we see them, right? Do we see any trends? Because that's something that can be put together and brought forward. Looking at student discipline, or I call it behavior, because that's a big arching umbrella, and looking at early literacy. Could those be three priorities that you want me to put some information together for our next meeting?
I would appreciate
Besides-
some special
besides-
education.
And some special ed.
Yeah. Although I
And
think,
then I don't have to do anything else, though, as I get this prepared for the next month.
Right,
Just wanna
exactly. That's right, I know.
I just,
I know.
gonna be a human.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. You know, I
Sorry,
think
Doc.
the things that you mentioned,
Yeah,
you know, and we said this before, Tricia, you said this at the beginning, that these student discipline, special education,
Right.
early literacy,
each
ESOL,
one is a
these are the
research
steps
component.
these are the things that hold up the achievement gap.
Yes, they do.
They hold up that stool, you know,
Yes.
if we make that picture. So, you know, the seat is the achievement gap, and the things that plug into this achievement gap are the student discipline, the special education, our English language learners, and our our literacy. That would be my, you know, take on it, Trish.
That's how I'm seeing it.
Yeah.
And
So if I could share, I've developed, I took our PEs, and we broke down the PEs within my division, and we identified what does it look like now? And then within those, the next column is where do we want to go? Same question that we utilized with the early literacy. And tomorrow we're finalizing that document. Would that be something you want me to bring forward in conversation? Because I only have, I think, 2 PEs to complete in conversation, because all of these basically title a PE, right? So I could bring that as a point, so it's listing what we have now, and then within membership in our division, what do you want it to be at? What do you want it to look like? So is that something you'd like me to bring forward versus doing the research for you as well in 4 areas? Because I could present to you what it looks like, and then within the division, what they say, you know what, we kind of also look at how we look at this.
So I'm not sure I understand.
So under student achievement, we looked at testing, right? And then we went from a summative testing tool to the formative tools that are utilized. We list the formative tools that are utilized. Then the next question I posed to division membership was, well, what formative tools would you like to look at? What can we be better at? I just tried to break it down so we could get a little more discussion within our division. So
I think that's your
that's my
wheelhouse.
template.
That's the
Okay.
weed.
That's
the
your
weeds.
wheelhouse.
Okay.
I guess
All right.
what
So
I,
I guess-
Tina, what I would like, Dr. Boswell, what I'd like to see here is that if we as an academic committee said that our priorities are behavior, special
Okay.
education, early childhood, ESOL, would that be supported by those that know? That's my question. Would that be supported? I mean,
When you say
I
those that
know.
can you be more specific?
Does the data support it?
Okay.
Okay, they have the data.
Right.
I know in my heart,
Right.
okay? I mean, I know
Oh, not
20
concur with
years
you.
worth of
Not concur with
anecdotal
you.
data.
Right.
And
But
all-
I don't want to go down a road that as the expert leaders, the instructional leaders in the school district are saying, that's not the way to get there. Do you know what I'm saying?
I understand it, but I know they know.
They know
Also,
too.
that's the way to
Right,
get there.
it
but
is the way to
that-
get there.
That question now is, are we gonna put our money where our mouth is?
Right.
Because when they come back with, this is how we wanna get there, are you gonna strike it out saying, hey, that's not one of my priorities? So in my mind, we're telling them, yes, it is right now, and we gotta convince the rest of the board that it is.
So those 4 topics would be our high priority of our next academic committee meetings, would be those 4 topics. And until such time that we feel they're fully vetted. Agreed?
Well, we might not all agree. Until we see the buy-in and
Right.
that they are planning their direction
Right.
in terms of improving achievement
Uh-huh.
in the direction we're talking about. When they bring back things, they gotta bring back stuff
Right.
that's involved with this.
Right, agreed.
You know, and I think they're driving that bus slowly, because they gotta go to the administrators of all the schools, talk about the same kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah, and tell them about how they're gonna slant that budget. Whenever you get that final verdict, we still gotta know that they've done their vetting, and we support where they're going. That's my take on this.
And I think the other question is for them also at the same time to know that, are there monies that can be reallocated?
Oh, absolutely.
There you go.
That
And
we're
that's
just
in
not,
there.
that we're, yeah, and that's in your wheelhouse, I guess, you know. Are there things that are ineffective? Are there, you know, if you went to the principals and said, okay, in early literacy or in the pre-Ks, we're gonna do this. We want to support you with more staff or more, but to do that, we need X amount of reduction. What can you give up for this? That type of thing.
That's what they do.
So, Tina, go
Yeah,
ahead.
so that's what I was driving at the beginning, although maybe it was misinterpreted as getting into the weeds. I think that's exactly what I was trying to get at, is that, you know, you've got to determine how the resources should be
Yeah.
probably reallocated,
Right.
you know?
Right.
And I certainly don't have that expertise
Right.
in my career. And that's what we rely on your expertise for.
Right.
And, you know, right, is it better to have, you know, put more of an investment in our human capital? Like I mentioned, you know, should we, I don't think this is probably correct, but have a math tutor at every grade level, at every school, or, you know, just something like that. I mean, that's, you know, that's what you can tell us by your, you know, your education and your degrees and your experience and the research that's out there.
Additionally, you know, some of that kind of information is also going to come out of efficiency study.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Right?
that,
Yeah.
exactly.
So as soon as that plays out, we'll have more information about, you know,
Yes.
where can we shift resources to target the priority.
There you go.
That's
Yeah.
perfect.
We're just trying to help set the priorities.
Right.
Right.
You, yeah.
Mel, so would you recap the priorities?
Well, in my mind, number one is early childhood. And I don't even think if that's the focus, then discipline's gonna play in, and that's gonna eventually shift. But if you wanna put some money towards discipline at a higher level, that's fine. But in my mind, early childhood, special needs, and all of the support components that it needs. Those are my priorities. And, you know, when I say special needs, I'm not just talking special education, I'm talking English second language people, you know, who need reading support, stuff like that. But in my mind, down here is where every dollar you see up there, I think you need to slide it down. That's what I came in there thinking. Cause I'm thinking, I'm thinking 20 years from now when I can't do anything but watch a board meeting and not figure out what's going on. That you guys are doing the right thing.
Okay. Mary?
So, 4 priorities: early childhood, student discipline, special education, and English language learners. On November 6th, we have our principal meeting. We may look at breaking them up by divisions and asking them questions with regard to these priorities as part of my agenda, because I have 2 other presentations being prepared for that day. But this could be break them up as a little workshop model. Okay?
All
And bring
to
that back.
affect the achievement gap.
Yes,
And
yes,
achievement of
yes.
all students.
Yeah.
Right, right. Those were the 4. Kathy, would you like to recap?
No, I agree. I think those are the 4. My only, I would like some data. I hate that, because when you say data, you're asking for more work, and I'm really not. My belief, based on my experiences, is with our English language learners, they don't all come in when they're in kindergarten or pre-K. That's the difficulty with that group. They come in when they get, and the kids that come when they're in high school, they're our
That's when you need
toughest.
the other
Yes,
intervention. Yes.
they're our toughest ones. So, I'm just curious, I know in my school district in Pennsylvania, we had the greatest number of ELL kids come in between 4th and 8th grade. I don't know why, but that's when their families were migrating, when their kids were that age.
Good job.
So that was telling in terms of, where we needed to put some more resources to meet the needs of those kids. So that's all I'm
That's
just
a good
bringing
point.
that. I
That's a
agree
good
with
point,
ELL.
Kathy,
Yeah.
because that also gives them a finer focus in terms of where are those pockets, where are they coming in?
Right. And to be cognizant of the fact that we want to see growth in all areas. We want to see our high kids growing. We don't, it's not that just total focus on this, but if you were to come and Ms. Walton were to say, okay, last year they wanted 32 special ed teachers and we gave them 4. This year I'm asking for 28. Then it'll be, that's one of our priorities. So that's the type of thing, and that would span all grade levels, not just early childhood special education.
So, from last night, when speaking at the board and question with regard to looking at early literacy and pre-K 12 kids, and a question was posed, how many students are we serving now? So we're serving 1,000 children in pre-K.
And how many, that was me who asked that, and so how many are in kindergarten?
Okay, I have 1,600 in kindergarten.
So about
there's your number.
2/3.
Yes, so there's the number that you were asking about
Yeah,
last
okay.
night. So right now, we're serving everyone who qualifies at the 50% mark, everyone. So I want to be able to provide you with that information. To meet an idea to give every child, you're looking at $5.4 million. So I'm just,
I've got $2 in my pocket.
You don't have to fight for $10 million.
and that's at maximum salary scale.
More classrooms,
Because it's a 20-to-1 ratio, there's a teacher and a classified per 20. So that's at maximum salary scale, looking at those type of numbers. So, at the low end, it was 4.4, so it's $1 million spread. Again, it's all about who you're hiring, so that's, I was working on that.
So a plan, a rollout plan,
Yeah.
that we
Easy
eventually
into
get
it,
there in
every
5
year.
years,
So-
So,
Okay, so I just
You
want
want $5.4 million?
right.
More,
more.
yeah.
So
Right.
if we expand pre-K, do we have space for them?
Well, that's the other part that came up with it. Then you have the space and facility issue, and that was my side, the cost, housing, and facility. I wasn't able to get beyond, this is all I could research into it, and that is where I'm at, exactly at Mr. Campbell is. Let's say Beaufort School County hits a lottery, and we have 5.4 million in the morning. That is my issue, that is the housing and the facility part and the equipment, and that's the other part of it, because that's just tentative. Let's say the low end 4.4 is salary, right? because we're looking at adding 60 additional personnel. But then it's the facility perspective and the desk, the chair, the materials. So that either way, that million still kicks in.
Right.
But is that an investment to look at?
I think so.
Okay.
I'd say-
So that would be a big conversation, which goes back to choice, goes back to looking at
Mhm.
a whole other shifting of the capacities
Right.
in schools.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Amanda?
I was just gonna ask if you had seen any pockets, because Jody and I were having a sidebar while we were talking a little bit about, we know there's space north of the Broad. So what about launching, I was asking the cohorts, meaning like, do we know, for
Is there a
instance?
greater need? You just got an answer, Amanda.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
is
yeah,
there a greater need here, we
Right.
can launch it on one side and then
Right.
work toward
Actually
it?
roll it out.
Roll it out, yeah, because,
Right.
I mean, I'd like to know where these kids are, the majority of them. I know that Lupton's population is growing, but it's not necessarily growing in preschoolers, I don't know. So, I mean, I know it is, but I don't know that it is as extensively with those children in the most need.
Kids.
Only issue would be if you could run into an equity issue if we're concentrating that program in one area, not.
Or what would,
But-
what would that model look like
Right.
in one area versus another? Is there a greater need and demand for early Montessori in another location? So
Mhm.
those are conversations, that's what we're doing now, start
Or even
rippling
can we
out.
move because if it is pre-K, would it be possible to transport them, you know, that kind of conversation?
The little kids.
Right.
Yeah, that's what, yeah, you can't.
They're little kids.
Too far.
But they're fragile.
Mhm.
I know kids are resilient,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't want my child.
But even on Hilton Head, we know the population is, not that it's drastically declining, but it is overall the trend that we've seen that was presented to us is declining. So we should be seeing room there in the next few years. So if we had a strategic plan where it was like, we start it here where we know we have space and there is great need,
And we
then we
correlate with
move
the
there where
demographics.
there's now becoming space. I mean, we know we have another need, because we have a lot of ELL over
Right.
there, you know. So I don't know. I
It's
just-
all about
I'd like
planning.
to look at it
It's all
and,
about
yeah.
setting your priorities and planning.
And
Not
when we're
everything
doing
can
it,
be done at once.
But when these things are coming about, I think it's, in terms of what we were talking about last night and even earlier today about transparency and trust, like we need to be communicating the entire way with the community that we're not just, giving this service to only this isolated area, we do have a long-term plan.
Right, exactly. Ms. Walton, before you joined us, we were just having the same conversation that you had in the operations committee, is where are our resources going to go? So when, what would be the budgetary impact of it? So when a priority being special ed, mine goes to personnel. And so that would be the type of thing, just like David explained last time, is that when the plan is presented, how does it align with, right, so, yeah, we don't have to say that we've got other things, but that was just, anything you want to say about that?
No, not really.
Yeah.
We have a pretty set formula for staffing,
Mhm.
and when staffing is requested, we need to see a plan,
Mhm.
and we need to see the feasibility of putting staff where it's requested. So if someone comes and asks for 32 teachers, that needs to be justified. We need to be able to brainstorm why 32 teachers.
Totally agree. And is that staffing formula something that can be looked at? Because, when you look at that staffing formula, it might look like there are 25 kids in every class, but that doesn't necessarily mean that if you have smaller, so that, and maybe that might be something that's looked at, and that's not for this conversation, but is that a state thing? That's not a state.
No, it's a state.
No. It's
not
local.
And that flip goes back to where our priorities are.
That's
Our
right.
priorities is we want the 28 more teachers because their design calls for it, and we back in their design.
That's right.
And we're gonna have no 28 teachers.
Right, so that's gonna be the,
If it means adjusting out of the box.
Right.
Because we gotta be thinking out of the box to fix some of the problems.
just because they say that you can have 33 kids of special needs on your caseload, doesn't mean that that is the best practices. One kid has 250 minutes, the other one has 1,800 minutes. Well, maybe not that much, we something, but, you know what I mean. Amanda?
Can I just ask a question? I don't know if Dr. Strauss knows this or not, but is there a policy in place in our district currently? I don't think there is. But is there one where, when we have a child who is showing repetitive behavior, is there an automatic referral to the RTI and then a psychological evaluation and SBA?
It's state-
Is there
it's
a
state.
national?
That's state law.
Okay,
By
but,
MTSS
so
process.
what do
that
we
put
have
into
in place in our schools then assuring that this is being followed? Because I can tell you from my own experience
Mhm.
that I'm aware of several kids in our district that have gone many years without the interventions that they need.
So,
And it has been on the books, so to speak, through that process since they're, let's just say, first grade, and now they're headed to middle school. And really, we've had like a discipline, schedule for them, like a check sheet, a behavior sheet, you know what I'm talking about, Mr. Gill?
Contract.
But we don't really have any strategies or an actual behavior plan in place to get those kids to be successful. We just constantly check off their behaviors, which is really not a strategy to improve them. So I'm trying to figure out how that translates from what we believe is happening to what's actually happening. And then all these things we're talking about, putting all this in place in early childhood, I think that's fantastic, but we have 23,000 kids already in our system.
Dr. Rodriguez mentioned before you
Yeah,
got here. so
and
think
I
his
feel
point
like,
was- Yeah.
I just have to be the mom that's gonna yell at the table for a minute and say, I need you to hear them, because they are being lost. And it's really difficult, to be the mom of a 10-year-old who's still struggling, and you knew there was an issue when they were 4.
Right.
And you don't have the resources, in our community either, because you either don't have insurance or you don't, whatever it may be. But I feel like we as a community in our schools should be helping to solve that problem if we want to improve the outcomes for all children.
I'll unlayer one part of that at least. We do have the tools here through Frontline to identify the students who've been recommended for RTI and MTSS, and that is something that we're looking at. Look in relation to what has started, where we are in process, and we're looking at that for schools. So the language was used earlier today regarding fidelity of practice, and we have the tools for what you're speaking now, that we can kind of at least monitor, and then
Yeah, I'd like to know
and
things.
find out where are we. So we're starting to look at that information as a system.
Okay, great, because I would really, just from my experience, I know that, not, for example, teachers aren't necessarily trained in special needs education or even how to identify those issues in the classroom. A lot of kids can mask things.
Mm-hmm.
So, we have that going on too. And then I don't know that principals in the past have been as forthcoming with, they don't want to necessarily identify kids with those issues, whether that's because of time, staff time or staff shortage or money or just the way it looks on paper to whoever they think is judging them, from the outside. But we really need to get back to kid-centric focus, and I'm hoping that the district is going to be more connected with that observation. I hope we're not just looking for a principal to oversee that and report back. I'm hoping that you guys are kind of digging deeper into their data from the schools itself.
Or being able to say, have you looked at this?
Right.
Right? Because we do lose some autonomy, but we could always pitch back and say, have you looked at this?
Right, or how are they
And remind
tracking?
you, have you looked at this?
Mhm.
Right? And we do have that capability, and we think that way. I'll leave it there.
Okay.
Okay. So I think we've pretty much discussed what our priorities are, what the academic committee, Mel, Kathy, and I are thinking that, this is what we will recommend to the board, as far as where we think, when you bring a budget and you bring these suggestions and you kind of move things around where you think it will make it work, then we can support that budget.
I need a timeline.
I know. And,
Tomorrow? No. Thank you, Alex.
no, and Dr. Watts, how much of a, in cement does it have to be?
No, I think what you've done today is great, personally. I think you
So
hit
what's-
the nail on the head, and not being on your committee and being one of the board members present, I agree 100% with what you've prioritized, and I think it's good because you've kind of made it very clear-cut, very, I don't want to say simple, but you've drilled down to the very basics, and I think that is exactly how we're going to improve achievement for all students.
But what's the next step? What are we doing with this information at the budget workshop?
So I think we need to be sure that the rest of the board is in agreement with what you present. This is what we came up with, and let the board discuss it. But think it'd be very unlikely that the board wouldn't support what you've
Okay,
recommended.
all right, I just want to make sure there wasn't a higher expectation of
No, I think
of
that's
another
fine,
step.
because then they're tasked with how do we do it?
How to build it,
Yep.
the budget around
Right.
those
Yep.
priorities.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mary, no, you don't need the next month of just working on this and.
But if I could ask, because of the 4 priorities, 3 are actually easy to get budgetary information, where student discipline's a little more complex.
Mhm.
So I'll look at that from a different frame, if you, okay?
Then instead of going through, because it is already 4:30, Mary, we definitely want to get back to the early childhood, the presentation by Miss Murray and Miss Hutchison.
Okay.
And, because Kathy and Mel, we didn't even get out of
You got the great-
the babies.
Yeah, we did.
We were just with the babies.
Yes.
Just with the babies.
Right, because we did 2 ARs that day.
Yes, we did.
Come on, Alice, we did 2 ARs that day as well.
So
We
should
do
you-
like to talk. We are all 3 teachers.
I just realized that.
Yes.
Ms. Glotz Dr. Glotz has a question.
Well, I just noticed you might want to just finish up by doing your committee meeting minutes for October 2. You skipped over that. Approval of your.
No, we did that.
They did that.
We did that. Mel,
No, I didn't even hear it.
yeah. We are, hey, when things need to be quick, we can do quick.
Pretty quickly, that,
It was so fast. Yeah,
we had a lot more priority, yeah.
yeah, we did that really
Priority to
fast.
deal with.
Right.
Very good.
Okay, can we look at the PEs? I think that the PEs might be something that we need to,
We have 2 up in November. We
Yeah.
have guidance services will be provided, I already spoke to Jerry Henderson. And student achievement, I believe, is up in November as well.
yeah, student achievement and instructional time.
Guidance as well, I believe, was one that was
That was
actually
September.
due in
Yeah, it
September,
was.
and it hasn't been presented.
Right, I
So
agree.
I need that to come forward,
As well as professional learning was in September.
okay?
Dr. Glodz, are we reworking this work plan, this work session? See, that's,
That's part of the strategic plan. That would fall up under strategic governance, because that's all part of the strategic.
okay.
Which
So,
we are having the mid-November.
right, so we should just go along and follow last year?
Right,
Okay.
because
Yeah.
So
we
Mary,
don't have
yes.
a work
Okay,
plan for
so-
this year. We
Right.
didn't approve one for this year.
But in November, we want professional learning,
Yes,
okay? Guidance services, so we catch up, and then the student achievement will be in a board meeting.
right, exactly.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so you want to go ahead, how many days, how many meetings do you think we should plan for the continuation of the Ms. Murray and Ms. Hutchison?
Just
Just
the
one.
early childhood, just one.
That's the only topic, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, so can we get that on the books? Can we plan that, everybody? We have,
We have a special called meeting at 5:30 on the 30th.
uh-huh,
We could do it before that, perhaps?
The 30th of October.
Mhm.
What is that for?
It's Dr. Rodriguez's.
that would work for me.
And
Is
is that here?
it work for, yes, that's here.
Yeah,
right?
it's here,
So we certainly could, is that what?
And Dr. Rodriguez's meeting is here as well.
right.
I can make that happen.
Okay, what time do you want to make that happen?
It all depends on your other meetings.
That starts at 5:30,
It
So
starts
do
at
you want to
5.
do it 3 o'clock?
and that gives a little bit of a break. Okay.
Yeah,
I know that's not
Okay.
convenient for some community members, but it'd be very informative to help us with our priority, so, okay,
So you're meeting here the 30th at 3 o'clock?
right. Okay,
Now, at that point, you just want that information, because I will not have met with the principals until November 6th.
right, no, I think that's
Okay.
enough, that's
Okay.
all the way through 5th grade.
That's
And
fine.
will you have is Miss Dillard going to, as in charge of elementary ed, going to be available for
I
that
can
as
have
well?
Carmen join us.
I just
Okay,
think that
yeah.
there are so many questions that would be great.
So that's for the early childhood presentation, that would be
Right, the one they've already done, we just didn't.
It's a continuation, it's to
Right.
finish it.
Right.
Yeah, we didn't, like we said, we didn't get out of the babies.
Right. So then, can we just plan one more meeting after that, so we can get these 2 PEs? Because you know how we really look at these PEs, and they usually last, a good hour.
So your
So-
normal meeting would be the 20th of November. So are you wanting to meet earlier in November?
I think the 20th, unless Kathy or Mel, you want to meet earlier, I'm gonna be gone for a week to Pennsylvania. So I will just be getting back on the 12th,
12,
yeah, so,
the 20 is fine.
The 20th.
So it's fine with me.
20th works.
right, I
It's
mean, I just didn't know if you
fine.
guys wanted to double up. I didn't know
Okay.
if you wanted to double up to catch up, because Dr. Stratus, we were much non-existent in the summertime, and
Yeah.
And
I
I'll-
mean, I think we also have to be a little bit cognizant of the work we're asking.
I
Dr.
agree,
Stratus to
I
do.
agree.
I mean, both Dr. Stratus and Dr. Rodriguez have hit the ground running.
Absolutely.
And we had such a void. I mean, there's no other way to describe it.
For a
That I
couple
think
years.
that we really have to be cognizant of the work that we're asking them to do. And
Totally
they're doing high quality work, and,
So let's do the 20th, our typical meeting date would be the
Alright.
3rd Wednesday.
And that'll be the
That's-
2 PEs.
The Wednesday before Thanksgiving, I don't know if any of you
Oh,
have plans.
no,
No, it's not.
Thanksgiving is
Thanksgiving
Monday.
is the 28th this year.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Super late
Yeah.
this
Yes.
That's doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure the retailers are.
Oh, yeah, it's like that.
Yeah.
So the 2 PEs, the period, and then some input with regard to the priorities.
Let's do that. I
Okay.
think that's great.
So will that meeting be here or at McCracken?
They would make it easier.
I
Oh,
know,
on the 20th?
on the 20th.
Yeah, but you're doing the one before that here, and this
Yeah.
one was here.
Right, I think we do need to go back to McCracken, only because
Oh,
we,
the 20th,
Of
we
November.
won't have, we won't have another meeting.
right, not right
Yeah.
after it. Do
Be
you
at
agree with
McCracken.
that, or Kathy, do you
Yeah,
agree with
Yeah,
that?
that's
Cracken's
fine.
Okay.
Cracken's better for us.
Except that room is just not.
What time,
able to meet
Kathy?
in.
It is hard
The
there,
tables and
yeah.
stuff.
Kathy, what time? I mean Kathy. Sorry, I'm looking at her.
Oh, no, yeah,
Your
that's
listening
okay.
time is at 4:30.
Chris tag now.
Oh, 4:30?
Your normal time is
Yeah,
4:30.
normal
I thought
time
today
is
was
4:30.
4, I didn't know it was
Yeah.
3, I thought you said 4,
So 4:30 on the 30th?
Right,
And
and
on
then-
the- on the 20th, and on the 30th, to 3 o'clock, correct?
Right,
So October 30th is 3 o'clock here at the district office.
right. And
November
that's gonna-
20th, it would be at McCracken at 4:30.
Right, and that's gonna be PE
PEs.
1.2 and PE 1.9.
And is that where you're gonna revisit the ARs? The 2 ARs that are coming back?
Yeah, and that should be 10 minutes.
At the
Okay.
most, yeah.
10 minutes because we made change, we suggested changes and stuff.
October 30th is just Ashley and
Yes.
Melissa.
Yes.
Okay.
And 5.4 million.
And
Just, gotcha.
Might have a new grant
It's
writer
easy.
by now.
Basketball players make it, why can't we put it in children?
That's
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
New grant writer.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else? We covered from A to Z.
Yes.
All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Who's half on that?